The banquet hall shimmered beneath cascading crystal chandeliers, each glimmering drop reflecting golden light across the room. Guests filled the space with laughter, clinking glasses, and the kind of polished conversations people used at events where image mattered more than sincerity. Claire stood near the entrance, clutching her small purse with one hand and the fragile remains of her confidence with the other. She had rehearsed this night in her mind 100 times. Her parents' anniversary, an opportunity to show she had grown, matured, built a life. Maybe they would finally see her as someone worthy of pride instead of a constant disappointment. She smoothed the skirt of her navy dress, lifted her chin, and walked forward. Her mother was surrounded by relatives, elegantly dressed in burgundy satin. Even at 58, she held an air of vanity polished by years of social expectation. When she noticed Claire approaching, her eyes made a quick downward scan, dress, hair, posture, before settling into their usual expression of passive disapproval. "Oh," her mother said, as though Claire were a minor inconvenience. "You made it." Claire forced a smile. "Of course I did. Happy anniversary." She held out the wrapped gift, a framed restoration of their wedding photo, a project she'd spent hours perfecting. Her mother accepted the box like a bill she didn't want to pay. "What is it?" she asked without interest. "A restored photo," Claire replied softly. "From your wedding day." Her mother nodded. "Put it with the others." The familiar sting settled in Claire's chest, but she said nothing. Instead, she quietly placed the gift on the table and retreated into the crowd. For the next hour, she floated between conversations, each one shallow and tinged with pity or curiosity. A cousin asked where she was working now, then blinked blankly at her answer. An uncle joked about her being the quiet one, as if shyness were a flaw she should have grown out of. Claire smiled politely, wondering how long she needed to endure before she could leave. But the real blow came from her aunt, sharp-tongued, nose always tilted upward. "Claire, sweetheart," the woman said loudly enough for nearby guests to listen, "your mother tells us you're still single. Isn't it time to bring home a nice boyfriend? Or are you being picky again?" Claire felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I never said that," she murmured. Her mother, who had overheard, stepped forward with a dramatic sigh. "Oh, Claire, don't pretend. You are picky. Honestly, you make everything difficult. Sometimes I wonder what's wrong with you." A few people chuckled awkwardly. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Claire's throat tightened. "There's nothing wrong with me," she said quietly. Her mother scoffed. "There is when you embarrass me in front of guests." The room grew still. A quiet, suffocating stillness. Claire steadied her voice. "I'm not embarrassing you. I'm just asking to be treated fairly." Her mother's eyes sharpened into cold blades. "If you can't behave, maybe you shouldn't have come." "But I came for you," Claire whispered. Her mother leaned in, face twisted with long-held resentment. "I wish you were never born." The words hit Claire like a physical blow. A glass clinked, then silence drowned the room. Everyone froze, forks halfway to mouths, smiles evaporating. For a moment, Claire couldn't breathe. But her voice emerged calm, almost peaceful. "Then consider me as if I never existed. Live your lives as though there was never a daughter named Claire." Gasps fluttered through the hall. Her parents stared, speechless. And Claire walked out, back straight, heart shattered, but free. The night Claire left home, the highway stretched before her like a dark, endless promise. Her car hummed beneath her, a quiet companion to the storm inside her chest. She drove without direction, following streetlights, road signs, anything that took her farther from the banquet hall, and from the words that still echoed viciously in her mind. "I wish you were never born." She had replayed them so many times that they no longer sounded like her mother's voice, but like a ghost whispering through cracked glass. She drove until her eyes blurred and her shoulders throbbed. When dawn finally stained the sky peach and lavender, Claire pulled over at a small overlook, breath trembling. For the first time, she allowed herself to cry. Not the quiet, controlled tears she'd shed in childhood, tears she'd wiped away before anyone noticed, but an unfiltered sob that racked her entire body. Every wound she had buried, every insult she had swallowed, every moment she had hoped for love, spilled out onto her shaking hands. When the crying stopped, she felt strangely weightless, as though the grief had hollowed a space inside her that she didn't yet know how to fill. She drove again, this time with purpose. By late morning, she arrived in a coastal city several hours away, a place she had visited once on a school trip and never forgotten. The air smelled like sea salt and eucalyptus. Waves crashed rhythmically in the distance, as though encouraging her to breathe again. She found a small, aging apartment building near the water. The landlord, a tired woman with kind eyes, didn't ask many questions. Claire signed a 6-month lease on the spot, using the emergency savings she'd built in secret. The apartment was small, barely furnished, with uneven floors and paint that had seen better years. But it was hers. No one's voice echoed within the walls except her own. No criticisms. No sighs. No disappointment. That first night, Claire fell asleep on a borrowed mattress, listening to the ocean through the cracked window. She woke up in the morning to seagulls and the realization that she had done something monumental. She had chosen herself. The days that followed were not simple. Healing never was. She found a job as a junior designer at a quirky little studio filled with houseplants, oversized mugs, and creative chaos. Her coworkers welcomed her, gently, curiously, never pushing her to share more than she wanted. It was the first environment where she felt like she could make mistakes without being shamed. Still, loneliness clung to her like a shadow. Some nights she stared at the ceiling, wondering if she had overreacted. Wondering if she should have stayed. Wondering if her mother ever regretted the words she'd spat at her. Those nights were the hardest. So she began therapy. The therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Marin, introduced her to questions Claire had never dared ask herself. When did you first feel responsible for your parents' happiness? When did love start to feel like pressure? What would your life look like without fear? Claire unraveled slowly, gently, painfully. She learned that her mother's cruelty was not her fault. She learned that trauma could hide in a smile, in silence, in the desperate desire to be accepted. And most importantly, she learned she was allowed to exist without apology. Weeks turned into months. Claire jogged the coastal trail every morning, breathing in sea air instead of old hurt. She learned to cook meals her mother once mocked. She painted small canvases that filled her apartment with color, proof that she was rebuilding. Healing didn't erase the scars, but it made them softer, less defining. Claire was no longer running away. She was moving toward herself. 3 years slipped by with the gentleness of tides, pulling away pieces of Claire's past, returning to her shores only what she was strong enough to hold. By the time her life had settled into a steady rhythm, she had become someone she barely recognized, confident, steady, and rooted in peace she had crafted with her own hands. She had a home filled with warmth. Work that valued her. Friends who cherished her. And a self she no longer ran from. So when the letter arrived, thin, creased, and carrying the handwriting she once would have recognized in a heartbeat, Claire felt the earth shift beneath her feet. It wasn't the words that unsettled her, but their absence. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just, "Your mother is unwell. The business is struggling. We need to talk. We need." The same phrase used throughout her childhood, always tied to obligation, never to love. She placed the letter on her kitchen table and stared at it for hours. Part of her wanted to burn it. Another part, the part that still remembered being a child wanting to be held, felt a tiny pull. But she didn't go for them. She went for herself. On the third morning, she packed a small bag, fed her dog, kissed his head, and told him she'd be back soon. Then she drove toward the city she once fled from, a place that had held her like a cage. The closer she got, the more memories pressed against her ribs. The streets, the cafes, the school building whose windows still reflected her teenage loneliness. But none struck harder than the sight of her childhood home. It looked smaller. Duller. Like a once grand painting left to fade in the sun. When she rang the doorbell, her mother answered. Her once polished exterior had dulled, cheekbones sharper, hair thinner, posture less unbreakable. But her eyes, still guarded, still armored. "Claire," she said stiffly. "I came," Claire replied. They sat in the living room where Claire had endured countless criticisms disguised as advice. The air felt heavy with the ghosts of their history. Her mother spoke first. "I assume you read the letter." "I did. You know the business is failing. Your father, he thinks you might help us." There it was. No warmth. No remorse. Just expectation. Claire let out a slow breath. "I didn't come to save anything." Her mother frowned. "Then why are you here?" "To talk," Claire said. "To finish what we never finished." A pause. A tiny crack in her mother's expression. Fear? Guilt? Claire couldn't tell. "You hurt me," Claire said softly. "For years. And that night, you broke the last piece of me that was trying to love you." Her mother's chin trembled, barely. "You misunderstood." "No," Claire interrupted gently. "I finally understood. You can't give what you don't have." The words landed between them like a quiet truth neither wanted to face. Her father entered then, looking older, shoulders sagging under invisible weight. "Claire, please. The business, we need." "I am not your solution," Claire said firmly. "You asked me to disappear. And I did." The world kept turning. Her father stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Claire stood. "I came to tell you this, your choices created the distance between us. Not mine." Her mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but pride held them back. Claire didn't stay to watch them fall. She walked out with a steady heart, leaving behind the ruins they had built, carrying only the pieces she chose to keep. Claire drove away from her childhood home, leaving behind the ghost she had carried for years. The late afternoon sun painted the city streets in gold, and for the first time in decades, the world felt like it belonged entirely to her. She did not glance back, did not allow the pull of old memories to tug at her heart. She had come back to face her past, and now, she was leaving it behind. Her revenge was not loud. It was not meant to humiliate, to punish, or to inflict pain. That was never her style, nor her goal. Claire's revenge was simple, it was living. Living beautifully, fully, and unapologetically. Every day she chose herself, every morning she reinforced the truth that she had been enough all along. She returned to her apartment by the coast, which had become a sanctuary of soft colors and creative energy. The walls were lined with paintings she had made during sleepless nights of healing, murals that captured stormy emotions transformed into beauty. She cooked meals she had once thought herself unworthy of enjoying, music playing softly in the background, dancing sometimes as if her body knew it had survived a storm and was now allowed to move freely. Her career flourished in ways she had never imagined. Clients praised her creativity, friends relied on her advice, and strangers noticed a quiet confidence that radiated from her. Her life was no longer measured by the approval of those who had tried to break her, but by the satisfaction of building something authentic, something entirely her own. Even love, when it entered quietly, came gently. She met someone patient and kind, someone who listened without judgment and celebrated her triumphs without envy. She allowed herself to love and be loved, not desperately, not out of obligation, but because it was a choice she finally had the right to make. The news trickled in slowly about her family. The business her father had clung to failed, one contract after another. Her mother spoke less and smiled even less. She saw in the reflection of conversations at family gatherings a house growing quieter, a family learning, belatedly, what it was like to live without her presence. Claire did not gloat, but she did not intervene. She had once tried to repair them. Now she realized that true freedom came from letting go. One morning, as the waves crashed against the shoreline, Claire wrote a letter, not to her parents, but to herself. "I survived. I thrived. I became everything they told me I could never be. I am free. I am whole. I am enough. She folded the letter and placed it in a small wooden box, a symbol of the day she stopped seeking validation and started living fully for herself. For the first time in her life, she understood the real meaning of revenge. It wasn't sharp words, social humiliation, or payback. It was resilience, growth, and a life so rich and radiant that those who once tried to diminish her could no longer touch her spirit. Her mother's cruel words had lost their power. Her father's disappointment was irrelevant. And Claire walked forward into her life with light in her eyes and peace in her heart. The sun dipped lower over the horizon, spilling warmth across the waves. Claire inhaled deeply, feeling the salty air fill her lungs, and smiled. For the first time, she felt entirely untouchable, not because she was stronger than anyone else, but because she was finally stronger than her past. She had become her own sanctuary, her own family, and her own victory. And in that quiet, brilliant moment, Claire realized, the greatest revenge is simply to live a life they can never break again. She stepped onto the sand, letting the ocean wash over her feet, letting the world witness a daughter reborn, not as someone they wished she hadn't been, but as a woman who would never be diminished again.